How different Star Trek would be without Seven of Nine blows my mind. When Star Trek Voyager introduced Seven of Nine in its fourth season, few could have predicted just how seismic her impact would be on the franchise. At the time, Voyager was struggling with middling ratings in a sense that it hadn't quite lived up to the promise of its unique premise. Enter Seven, a former Borg drone with a piercing intellect, emotional vulnerability, and a character arc that would redefine not just Voyager, but Star Trek as a whole. But what if she had never joined the crew? It's a tantalizing thought experiment. Imagine a Star Trek timeline where Seven of Nine never stepped foot aboard the USS Voyager. No catsuits. No, I will comply. No redemption arc for a lost soul torn from the collective. It's hard to picture now, but this alternate Trek universe would be unrecognizably different in ways that touch nearly every corner of the franchise, from character development to storytelling style to the very survival of certain Trek shows. And honestly, the idea blows my mind. The narrative gap she filled would have swallowed Voyager. Before Seven of Nine's arrival, Voyager was built around its core concept, a Starfleet crew and a Maquis crew forced to cooperate in the uncharted Delta Quadrant. That premise had enormous potential, but by Season 3, the writers had mostly abandoned the Starfleet versus Maquis tension, and the show began to lean into more generic episodic sci-fi. That's not to say it lacked good episodes, but it lacked urgency, identity, and evolution. Seven of Nine changed that overnight. She wasn't just a new character, she was a new thematic engine. Without her, Voyager would have remained stuck in a loop of anomaly of the week episodes. Seven's arc provided a serialized thread of growth, struggle, and identity that anchored the show. Her journey from cold, hyper-rational drone to a woman rediscovering humanity gave the series emotional depth it had previously lacked. Without Seven, the show doesn't get its emotional second wind. It doesn't grow up. And it may not have lasted 7 seasons. Janeway would be unrecognizable without their complex bond. Captain Kathryn Janeway is now regarded as one of the most iconic captains in Star Trek history, but her legacy is inseparable from her relationship with Seven of Nine. Their dynamic teacher and student, mother and daughter, mentor and adversary was lightning in a bottle. In Seven, Janeway found a moral challenge that tested her values. Could she teach humanity to someone who had been stripped of it? Could she impose ethics on someone who was used to assimilation and collective thinking? Without Seven, Janeway would have lacked the foil that shaped her most emotionally powerful episodes. Janeway's moral absolutism was constantly tested by Seven's pragmatism and Borg logic. This tension elevated Janeway far beyond the tough female captain archetype. It made her complex, vulnerable, and deeply human. Without Seven, Janeway becomes more isolated, commanding a ship with far less introspective conflict. She might have remained a fine captain, but not a transcendent one. The Borg would have become stale or worse, irrelevant. The Borg had been Star Trek's ultimate threat since their debut in The Next Generation, but by the late 90s, there was a risk of them becoming repetitive. They were powerful, yes, but they were starting to feel one-dimensional, a scary villain with no real nuance. Enter Seven of Nine. Her very existence as a liberated Borg shattered the mythology. She introduced a fascinating layer to the collective, individuality within assimilation, trauma within perfection, and choice within programming. She made the Borg personal. She made them tragic. Without Seven, we don't get those layers. We don't get Drone, where a new Borg is born and chooses death to avoid becoming a monster. We don't get The Raven, which explores PTSD through the metaphor of her assimilation. We don't get Dark Frontier, where we finally see the seductive power of the collective through her eyes. Without Seven, the Borg would have remained an overused, underexplored enemy. She saved them from narrative extinction. The franchise's female representation would have taken a hit. Much has been said about the controversial decision to bring on Jeri Ryan in a skin-tight catsuit. But boiling Seven's importance down to costuming does a disservice to what she represents, both in universe and out. Seven of Nine evolved into one of the most layered, powerful, and intellectually complex women in Star Trek. Her story of reclaiming identity, agency, and autonomy is unlike anything else in the franchise. She's logical, yet emotionally rich. Strong, yet vulnerable. Female, yet not defined by a romance, at least not until Picard, and even then in a groundbreaking way. Without her, Voyager loses its strongest character arc for a woman, maybe for any character. And the ripple effects go even further. Would Star Trek, Picard have had the courage to include a same-sex romance in a major role without Seven? Would the franchise have continued to push nuanced female characters in leading roles, like Michael Burnham or Beckett Mariner? Without Seven blazing that trail, it's hard to say. The impact on Star Trek, Picard would be devastating. Seven of Nine's return in Star Trek. Picard is one of the most lauded elements of the series. She didn't just come back as fan service, she came back transformed. Hardened by loss, burdened by morality, and more human than ever, she became the emotional backbone of Picard's later seasons. But what if she'd never existed? Picard would be a far lesser show without her. The narrative threads involving the XBSX Borgs would vanish. The emotional weight of what the Borg took from people like Seven and what they left behind would be missing. And Raffi Musiker's relationship with Seven, which broke new ground for LGBTQ+ representation in Trek, would disappear entirely. The absence of Seven wouldn't just hurt Voyager, it would leave a gaping hole in Picard's thematic tapestry. The evolution of Star Trek's tone would have stalled. Seven's presence on Voyager marked a tonal shift. Her character allowed for deeper psychological stories, more serialized arcs, and richer emotional stakes. In many ways, she foreshadowed the direction that Star Trek would eventually take in Deep Space Nine, Discovery, and Picard, storytelling that is character-driven, serialized, and morally nuanced. Without Seven, Voyager stays more traditional, less risk-taking, less intimate. And the franchise might have interpreted that as proof that traditional episodic storytelling was all Trek fans wanted. Seven proved otherwise. She was a character who demanded growth in herself and the narrative. Her presence encouraged the franchise to evolve. Without her, that evolution might have been delayed for decades. Her absence would alter fandom forever. Star Trek fandom is passionate, devoted, and incredibly diverse, and Seven of Nine has always been one of the most beloved figures among fans. Whether it's cosplayers perfecting her silver catsuit, fanfic writers diving deep into her inner life, or LGBTQ+ fans finding representation in her later storylines, Seven has always been a magnet for connection. Without her, an entire generation of fans might have been left out. Her journey as an outsider, a trauma survivor, and a reclaimed self resonates across lines of gender, orientation, neurodiversity, and experience. Her intelligence made science cool. Her struggles made emotion powerful. Her transformation made hope tangible. Without Seven, Star Trek loses one of its most important ambassadors. The real-world fallout, ratings, recognition, and relevance. Let's not forget the business side. Seven of Nine helped save Voyager from cancellation. Jeri Ryan's addition to the cast is often cited as a pivotal ratings boost in Season 4. Critics suddenly took notice again. The character became a pop culture icon,